Scary Movie is the sixth installment in the long-running parody franchise that sees the Wayans brothers returning to helm the film on the writing side and creative control over the franchise that they created. And before I get into my review, I just wanted to kind of lay my expectations right up front and how I was feeling going into this film. I was obviously a very big fan of those first two Scary Movies. I was born in '95, so that came out, and I saw those films at a very young age. So that series as a whole is very dear and fond for me. And I loved those movies. They were very core memories and core movies I saw growing up. I wasn't the biggest fan of 3, 4, and especially 5. I think that one is absolutely terrible. So obviously I was a big fan with what the Wayans brothers brought to this franchise when they created it in those first two films. So when I heard that they were finally regaining control of the franchise and were coming back to make another movie after it being so long since the last one, I was very excited. There was nothing about this that I had heard that made me not really excited for this film and making it one of my most anticipated films of 2026. And obviously, since it had been so long since the Wayans brothers were attached to this franchise, there have been many movies that have come out since then that they could parody and have some very useful commentary on it. And obviously in the marketing, they pitched this as being a film where no line will be crossed. Everyone will be the butt end of a joke. And I was very excited to kind of go back to this style of comedy and see how it lands in 2026. When I saw some of the trailers, some of the jokes didn't really land all that well with me, but again, these parody movies tend to be a million jokes a minute, so even if one joke doesn't work, the next one probably will. And obviously I saw all of the pretty negative and low reviews that were coming out of the early screenings for this film, and I gotta say, after sitting down and watching it last night, I had a really, really fun time with this film. Do I think it's perfect? No. Do I think it's as good as those first two Scary Movies? I don't. I don't think it's on the level that those first two films had. But I will say, seeing it last night in a packed theater with a crowd that was very interactive with the movie, I had a really fun time, and I think that the jokes and the comedy in this movie hits more than it misses. So overall, I had a very enjoyable time with Scary Movie. And to start off my positives, I think the best thing about this film is the reunion of the OG cast. You have Anna Faris back as Cindy Campbell, Regina Hall back as Brenda, Marlon Wayans back as Shorty, and Shawn Wayans back as Ray. And I think them finally reuniting, 25 years later, was a breath of fresh air. It was great to see these characters back again, particularly Cindy and Brenda. I think they had the best chemistry of the OG cast. I thought Marlon Wayans was really good, as well as Shorty. I felt like they did a very good twist of how to bring that character into the modern age. So just getting to see them all back on the screen, did give me a sense of nostalgia warmth, because I loved those characters in those first two films, and getting them back was a fun time. I also wanted to give a shout out to the girl who played Cindy's daughter, Olivia Rose Keegan, Sarah. She was fantastic. I mean, even just the mannerisms that she had in being Cindy's daughter, she did a very good job at portraying someone who looked and acted like Cindy. And, it was a lesser version, obviously, because I don't think Anna Faris can be 100% replicated. She's a very unique actor in the style she brings into her characters. But I thought that she did as well of a job as you could possibly do. So the casting, whoever was involved with getting her as Cindy's daughter, I thought did a fantastic job. I really thought some of the commentary as well here was done really effectively, particularly when it comes to a lot of the horror movies that we missed, from this franchise since the last film was released. And pop culture as a whole, I felt like there was a lot of clever ways that they brought up different horror movies, different, political or pop cultural events, and, did a good job and made for some really good laughs centered around things like that. Obviously, there's a lot that's happened since then. There was a lot of movies that they could have referenced, and I think they go for quite a lot here, but I thought they did a good job with most of the jokes there. And I was honestly even shocked at how many of the references there were to very recent movies, and even one in particular that's still in theaters and still playing right now. I was very shocked that they were able to, fit that into the film. I know there's been reports that there was obviously reshoots and some segments that were either cut out or added in later on, which I imagine the one that I'm referring to was one of those. But I just liked how they basically stemmed from as recent as movies that are in theaters currently to movies that were from 13 years ago. So there's really a wide variety in the films that you're getting parodied here. Jesus. I thought this film had a very brisk and fast pace as well. This film is a very joke-a-minute speed. It is constantly moving. It is constantly going from scene to scene. You're not really having a lot of time to breathe and, reflect on what you just watched because we're already on to the next skit and to the next joke. It was very similar to Naked Gun in my eyes, in the pacing where it's quick, it's go. Sometimes you don't even hear the next joke because they're just already, people are laughing and they're already on to the next one. So this is a very fast-paced film. It's like an hour and a half. I think that breezes by. You go through this film very quickly. It does not drag at any point whatsoever. And I really enjoyed that about the film. And where this film left off and like the final killer reveals, I thought was super satisfying and one that was a very interesting meta commentary about, horror in general, when it comes to like requels and remakes, and then this franchise's history specifically. Won't get into spoilers as to what it was, but obviously if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. So where this movie ended, I felt like it was a very satisfying and natural conclusion to this film, and was definitely one of the stronger points of the movie. And before we get into my negatives, I just wanted to talk about the reception that this film has received. Obviously, it's got pretty low Rotten Tomatoes critic scores right now. This has never really been a franchise that has been like high reception on the critic side. Typically, fans love it a lot more than the critics do. But I gotta say, I'm pretty confused with how the critics have been responding to this movie, considering that just last year we got very good critical acclaim for The Naked Gun, which in my eyes, when I watch these films, there are some things that work a little bit less here with Scary Movie, and we're going to get into that in a moment, and then they work a little bit less effectively than they did in Naked Gun, but there is a substantial gap between the Rotten Tomatoes scores on Scary Movie and Naked Gun, when I actually think that they're very similar films. I think they do a lot of the same things. They have that joke-a-minute style. I would say that Naked Gun was a little bit better with its plot and the story it was telling, which, again, we'll get into that here in a minute. But I think what they offer are very similar experiences, so I'm kind of struggling to understand why critically this has been so panned compared to something like Naked Gun. So yeah, I don't know if anyone could maybe try to clarify that for me in the comments, but very, very baffled at the reaction that the critics have had for this film, and I kind of think it's unjustified in my opinion. And to start off my negatives, and this isn't really a negative for me personally, but I think in general, these films are very much catered towards a specific audience. And particularly, I think, a specific age group. I have some friends that are, on the younger side. They're younger than I am, and they've never gotten into this franchise. And I do believe that this style of humor is not going to be one that is necessarily, like, welcoming for the new generation. There's a lot of things, that they talk about in this series and in these movies that I think a younger generation can't relate to or really doesn't understand that type of humor, which I'm not blaming them for. It's just growing up in different eras. And the Wayans brothers definitely bring that style of comedy from the late 90s and, early to mid 2000s into this film. So if you go and you check out the first original Scary Movie and that's just not your thing, I don't think there's anything here that's really gonna, make you feel any differently. This is very much in the style and in the tone of those first two original films. And while overall I do feel like I had a really good experience with this film, I think I did get a lot of good laughs in this movie. There were some misses comedically. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like I said, there's a million jokes in this film, and it's very joke-a-minute style comedy here. And there were a lot of jokes that missed. I think there were a lot of jokes that hit as well. And I think there was more positive than negative. But I do believe that there were some jokes, and particularly some certain bits with characters that didn't really hit as well for me. We'll get into that here in a minute. But yeah, there was more misses than I would have liked. I would have liked this to have been a more balanced experience where I enjoyed more of the jokes than I ultimately ended up doing. I also think there was a decent amount of segments in this film that, rather than trying to create a bit and a joke, they were just overtly references. I mean, and there's a couple of different things where I felt that. There are just straight up scenes in this film that are straight up just copying the movie they're parodying and not really adding much to it. Like, you know, I'll kind of get mild spoilers here. Like, there's a Terrifier scene and a Terrifier parody here, which revolves around the mall scene from Terrifier 3. That scene was already kind of naturally comedic in Terrifier. So when you parody that scene here, it's basically just the same scene with Anna Faris involved in it and a kid finding, you know, a human ball sack. And that's pretty much it. The rest of the scene plays out the same. And I felt like there were multiple scenes in the film where that particularly happened. And I also think on the political joke side that there was definitely a lot here that fell flat. And I feel like on both sides, really. It wasn't even just like, hey, the left-leaning jokes didn't work, right-leaning jokes didn't work. I felt like all around the political jokes that they put in here really weren't that funny, and only because we've heard all these before. These are all jokes that have been mainstream for many years and have been said repeatedly. So, you know, I thought when the Wayans brothers were coming back, we were going to get a little bit of a fresher perspective, and we don't really get that here. So that was a little bit disappointing for me. And I talked about it earlier, but the plot of this film is all over the place. Now, I know what you're thinking. You know, we don't really go to a scary movie for a strong plot. But what I will say, when you look at those first two films, they did a good job at, mainly it was obviously a parody of Scream. That was what the first movie was. But then they also found clever ways to integrate other films into the narrative that they were telling of the parody of Scream. Here, I would say mostly the narrative is a parody of Scream 5, which I thought was good because obviously I felt like that film provided a lot of commentary that they could parody here. But I also felt like when we weren't doing the Scream 5 plot, it kind of was just jumping all over the place. And I thought that was really prevalent in like the middle section of the film. I think the beginning was really good, and then I think the end was really good, but in the middle, it just really struggled to keep a kind of cohesiveness in what it was doing. And then in that middle section, it just felt like we were going from skit to skit. It wasn't really narratively making sense as to why we were here and why we were doing this. So, you know, like I said, I know we don't go to these films for, you know, the best plot you've ever seen, but I would have appreciated a little bit more cohesiveness and togetherness when it came to putting all of these skits and all these parodies together. And even though I talked about it before, I will say, of the OG cast members, I really was a little bit underwhelmed with what we got here from Regina Hall and Shawn Wayans. Really particularly Shawn Wayans, because I think at least Regina Hall had really good scenes with Anna Faris. When she was on her own and it was basically, you know, a parody of Ma the entire time, I didn't really love that. But with Shawn Wayans, we're basically just doing the same thing that we did with him in the first two films, but that was all we were doing. At least in those first two movies, we got him on his own things that he was doing on the side and was exploring other things while also centering around, you know, the fact that he's gay. That was a big running gag in the first two films, but that's basically all he's doing here. And I think that was exemplified in his opening scene when he's first introduced in this movie. I won't go into specifics on what it is, but it is a parody of a scene from Sinners, and I just didn't think that scene worked at all. I thought it was way overdrawn, it went way too long, And I thought we got a lot of that from Shawn Wayans here, and I would have appreciated him getting a little bit more to do in this movie. And overall, like I talked about it earlier, I don't think this is up to the same quality that Scary Movie 1 and 2 were. I do think it's better than 3 through 5, but I wouldn't say it's better significantly. Particularly 3. I think 3 is probably the strongest of 3 through 5. And I would only say that Scary Movie 6 is just a little bit better than that one, which to me is still a pretty significant step down from 1 and 2. But even with that being said, I still had a really good time with this film. I would rather them continue to make movies with the Wayans brothers at the helm of this franchise that they created than to make something like what we got with Scary Movie 5. I enjoyed this immensely more, and I will still say overall I was positive on the film. I really had a good time. I did get some good laughs. I think there are some good comedic moments in this film. I just wish there was a little bit more. I think they would have done a lot better if they maybe would have toned it back a little bit and tried not to parody so much here, because I think that's kind of where this film gets hurt, is it just tries to do so much and parody so many different things because it's been so long since we've gotten a Scary Movie. But I think if they would have pulled it back a little bit and just kind of focused maybe on like 4 or 5 different franchises, that would have been beneficial for the film itself. But like I said, overall, I still had a fun time with it. I think, the crowd I saw it with was, like I said, a very interactive and a very rowdy crowd where, they reacted at the right times in the movie. So I think that made for a more enjoyable experience. So, maybe over time I won't like it as much, but after seeing it for the first time yesterday, I think overall I am positive on it. So that's going to be it for me today. That is my review of Scary Movie. Go ahead and comment below. Let me know what you thought. How does it rank in the franchise for you? Do you think this was a return to form? I know opinions are kind of all over the place right now, with it being opening weekend and everybody seeing it for the first time, but just comment below, let me know what you thought about it. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you haven't. I'm doing a lot of content recently. I'm going to be going to see Masters of the Universe tonight, so I'll be putting out a review for that. I've been playing 007 First Light on live streams, so I'm going to continue doing that until I'm finished with the game and then move on to another game. So just subscribe, you'll get more content coming from me. And that's going to be it for me today. Everyone, have a great day.